The Somaliland Campaign, also known as the Anglo-Somali War and the Dervish War, lasted from 1900 until 1920 and is an often overlooked campaign of World War I. This 20-year campaign witnessed British and Italian forces fighting together against the Dervish movement with assistance from Ethiopia from 1900 to 1904, although Ethiopia would then also have some instances where they changed sides and other stuff. British Somaliland came to be in the late 1880s after the ruling Somali authorities signed a series of protection treaties granting the British access to their territories on the northwestern coast. Meanwhile, Italian Somaliland was founded when the Sultanate of Hobyo requested Italian protection, and a treaty to that effect was signed in February of 1889, making Hobyo an Italian protectorate. An Anglo-Italian border protocol was signed later on May 5, 1894, followed by an agreement in 1906. In 1901, the British joined with the Ethiopians and attacked the Dervish with the force of 1,500 troops. The Ethiopians failed to gain a hold on the eastern Ogaden region, and the British were eventually forced to retreat, having accomplished none of their goals. The 1902 Battle of Irigo saw British Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Cobb of the King's African Rifles be awarded the Victoria Cross, though. The second expedition from February until June of 1903 saw the British request Italian support, which was accepted as the Dervish movement had crossed into Italian-controlled territories of Somalia. This expedition would also fail to defeat the Dervish movement, and a British detachment was annihilated, but casualties were always proportional, so the Dervish couldn't necessarily claim a great victory. Next came the third expedition from January to May of 1904, where the Ethiopians advanced on the Dervish forces with support from the British and Italian navies. British infantry successfully defeated the Dervish at some ports and forts and offered the Dervish mullah safe passage to Mecca to live in exile, which he did not reply to, and things would be relatively quiet for a while except for the Battle of Dol Madoba, where the Dervish defeated the Somaliland Camel Constabulary but suffered proportional casualties as always. On March 12, 1914, the British established the Somaliland Camel Corps after the disastrous Battle of Dol Madoba to maintain order in the Protectorate. The Camel Corps served against the quote-unquote Mad Mullah and Dervish movement beforehand, but after 4 large expeditions had failed to capture him, the Dervish leadership remained at large, and the British sought to create this Somaliland Camel Corps as a reaction. Another British force was gathering against the Dervish in a 4th expedition when they were interrupted by fate in the outbreak of World War I. Those Serbs and Austro-Hungarians really had to mess with the war in Somaliland in 1914. How rude of them. Prominent British officers were deployed to Somaliland, such as Adrian Carton de Wiart, who lost an eye during the campaign, as well as Hastings Ismay, who would later become Prime Minister Winston Churchill's chief military advisor. Now, Africa wasn't just some random sideshow in World War I. The East Africa campaign of the Great War witnessed the Entente plow into German East Africa, which is Tanzania today, and they had a rough time of it as the Entente was up against a brilliant guerrilla strategist named Paul Emil von Lettow-Vorbeck, and this caused valuable Entente resources to be diverted to failing to defeat the guerrillas, and the Germans would surrender 2 weeks after the end of World War I. There were other theaters in Africa, but we're primarily just going to be looking at East Africa and Somalia here. World War I in Somalia saw the Ottomans and Germans provide support to the Dervish movement in an effort to undermine the British and Italians. Also, Ethiopian Emperor Lige Liasu succeeded Menelik II, who had been anti-Dervish. Many of the Ethiopian nobility and commoners were very impressed by the early successes of the Central Powers and would listen to German and Turkish propaganda a lot, as they were the original Hearts of Iron IV players. The Central Powers wanted the Ethiopians to drive the Italians out of Eritrea and Somalia, as well as tie down the British. But the Ethiopians were more so fanboys of the Central Powers than co-belligerents. Rumors circulated that in return for driving the British into Sudan, as well as attacking the Italians, he would be rewarded with a strategic port of Djibouti from the French, because carving up France and the French Empire was the go-to for people wanting to join the Central Powers. Meanwhile, the Entente just kind of wanted to keep Ethiopia neutral. However, the Ethiopians would provide some aid to the Dervish movement until Liasu fell from power in 1916. The 5th expedition came at the end of World War I from 1919 to 1920. Although the majority of the combat took place in January of 1920, the British had begun preparations for the assault in 1919. The British forces were led by the Royal Air Force, and the ground component included the Somaliland Camel Corps for their comeback. and after 3 weeks of fighting, the 20-year conflict was brought to an end with a Dervish defeat. The Dervish movement collapsed soon afterwards, as both British Somaliland and Italian Somaliland would be consolidated into their own borders. So yeah, there's my summary of the Somaliland Campaign of World War I, as well as before and afterwards. What do you think about the Somaliland Campaign? Did you know about it before this video? Is there more stuff that I should have covered and didn't mention? Write in the comments below, and thank you for watching.